Today I'm trying out a new kind of hidden handle, and I think it might be my favorite idea for a handle yet. It's made as part of the lid, and the execution might be a bit fiddly, so let's see how we go. I'm using 500 grams of clay for the container and 400 grams for the lid. I start with the lid. Once I've centered the clay, I flatten the clay out to about 13 centimeters. And then I start to form a channel about 1 centimeter in from the outer edge. And with the clay around the outer rim, I press in to form a flange. I'd like about 0.5 centimeter on the outer of the flange. Now, with the clay lift in the middle, I'm going to push down into the clay and open out. And then I'm ready to pull up the walls. Once I've got the walls up to height, maybe about 6 centimeters, I can start to collar in. And then I can gently squeeze the rim together. So I'm creating a closed form inside the lid. And I can press that join. And I flatten the join with a rib. So this is going to be the base of the lid. And then I trim around the outer edge and smooth with a sponge before measuring with calipers. And this is one reason for making the lid first. It's a little easier to throw the base to fit the lid. And I can wire through and set aside. So now I take the 500 grams of clay to make the base. And this part is super simple. So I center the clay. I'm using a fine white mid-fire clay. And I want to add quite a traditional blue and white decoration. I flatten the clay. Then I push down into the clay. I leave a little under 1 centimeter of clay in the base and I open out. I start to form the walls and I compress the base with a sponge. And then I bring up the clay into the walls. I want the walls to be quite straight, and I'll explain why when I'm decorating. And then I use my rib to straighten the walls. I trim around the base. I wire through and then I set aside to dry. I'm ready to trim, so I center and then fasten the base. I'm going to trim a very shallow foot ring. I tidy up around the base. And now I mark out the foot ring. And then I trim across the base. And I just trim up to the mark I've left for the inner edge of the foot ring. I check that there's enough clay in the base and continue to trim. And then I smooth the base with a sponge. Now I can upend the base and use it right-sided as a chuck for trimming the lid. I tidy up around the outer edge and then just trim across the top. And I smooth across the top, leaving a flat surface. And this is where the fun starts. I take half of a circle cutter I'm using the cutters I used to create my scalloped edges. It's actually just a cookie cutter cut in half. This one would be about 4 centimeters. I've marked out a circle so I know where to cut. And now I gently cut down into the top. You have to make sure that your clay is firm enough when you cut into it to hold its shape, and not too dry so that your clay cracks when you cut. So I cut 2 halves, leaving a strip of clay in the middle. And using a knife, I cut away the 2 semicircles of clay. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you stay up to date with all of our innovative and unusual projects. And of course, feel free to comment and like below, it's much appreciated. And then I gently tidy up a little with a sponge. So I've let my container dry. Now, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to decorate with blue and white, and I'm going to use a tissue transfer, and I've cut out a circle for the top. I've tried to find natural places to cut through the pattern. So this is a traditional blossom pattern. And so I set the tissue transfer down onto the lid, face down, that is with the underglaze in contact with the greenware. And then I apply water with a brush to the tissue transfer. I find it much easier to apply tissue transfers onto greenware. You can use them on bisqueware, but it's a little more difficult to get a good transfer. As I brush water on to the tissue transfer, the image is transferred to the greenware. And now I do the same for the base of the container. I've cut out sections of the design that I think will work. And then I wet the tissue transfer. The smooth surface makes this a really simple process. I leave it to dry. I must say I do have a peek to see if it's ready to peel off yet. And then I peel away the tissue transfer. This design is really forgiving, so if there are a few patches that haven't adhered fully, it's not really a problem. I've got to say, peeling the tissue transfer off is pretty satisfying. And then I glaze. I'm using a brush-on clear mid-fire glaze. Two even coats, and then we're ready to glaze fire. And here's the final container. Perfect for storage with this cute recessed handle. For more amazing canisters, check out my video on making canisters in one piece, and happy potting!